Great. Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm Leah from Connected AU, and I am so excited to introduce Mark Lamprell, a multi-talented novelist, film director, screenwriter, children's book writer, and painter. That's a lot. His film credits include Babe, Pig in the City, My Mother Frank, and Never Too Late. Mark's novels, published worldwide, include The Full Ridiculous and his latest, Things I Need You to Know. He's co-authored children's books, and his paintings have recently been exhibited in Spain. Across all media, Mark explores the theme of flawed individuals coming together to achieve something greater. Mark, thank you so much for joining us, and all the way from Valencia in Spain as well.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me, Leah.
Thanks, Mark. I just will jump straight in with the first question. I would love to know what inspired Things I Need You to Know. Such a great book.
Thank you. Thank you. A couple of things two sort of separate ideas started forming in my head. I wanted to write about someone who fell in love with their partner after their partner had died. I thought that was a really interesting idea. But in a way that was satisfying. So not just, oh, I miss you, but, oh, I finally realized your substance. And even though you're gone, I'm able to still fully love you. I thought that was a really interesting idea. Then the other idea that was sort of forming in me, I became slightly obsessed for a while. There was a series of documentaries on Netflix, I don't know if you remember, about women being conned by men into relationships, you know, and the thing that really interested me about that was those women weren't stupid women. They were well educated. They weren't isolated. They were also
like
intelligent. They were beautiful. Exactly. And so that really interested me too, like what type of person can do that? What type of man can do that? And what are the circumstances in which you can be seduced into that? So those two very separate ideas sort of were forming. And I thought, oh, actually, I'm going to put them together into one thing, which is sort of what I did.
Yep. I love it. No, that was fantastic. Sorry, somebody else is just trying to get in. I'm just going to let them in. And, you know, were there any sort of real life experiences or emotions that influenced the creation of the characters or the storyline, or the pure fiction?
Mostly pure fiction. I was on the edge of a kind of weird domestic violence relationship between two friends. And what interested me about that experience was, well, it was an awful experience, but she who was the victim and I, who was the friend of the guy that was perpetrating, were convinced that it was just a mental health issue. And all he needed to do was get counseling and he'd be okay, kind of thing. And we spent this one Saturday, I remember sitting in my study in Sydney, calling around hospitals. And I remember a woman at one hospital said to my friend, you are in a domestic violence situation and you have to get yourself out of it. And I was we were both shocked. We were like, oh no, you don't understand. This is not the circumstances. He's not that guy. But in fact, turned out he was that guy. And we had got it wrong. But that really interested me too, that notion that how sensible people cannot see what's really happening. Yeah.
Well, Marcello, yes, certainly very charming, I think. So you conveyed that, I think, for sure. Any research that you had to do when you're writing the story, not just about domestic violence, but and that sort of stuff, but what about like law, or because Birdie's got the big professional career, or medicine? There's quite a bit with medicine in there as well.
Yeah, I did a fair bit of medical research, but also I'm very lucky. My wife works at Macquarie University in the medical faculty. She's a researcher there, so it wasn't really complicated medical research. It was more calling across the room, going, "Hey, you know, if somebody was going to die of this, then how would they?" Strychnine. Okay, thanks very much. Yeah. But then I did send it out to a couple of doctors as well, because I wanted that medical stuff to be absolutely spot on. And I also sent it out to lawyers as well, just to get feedback on both that. I didn't want anything to ring false, kind of thing. So, and hopefully it doesn't, you know.
No, Okay, so
Yeah.
yeah, what an amazing resource to tap into with your wife's yeah,
Yeah, just there.
university. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome. Anything that you found like a little bit challenging when you were writing this book?
Um, I look, I always find all books kind of challenging. I guess the thing about this book, there are a lot of characters. I was slightly worried about having 5 daughters and making them all real and giving them a journey and making them, you know, 3-dimensional.
Yeah.
But having so many, I kind of wanted that many daughters because I wanted Bertie to be overwhelmed by you know, she'd sort of been focusing on her life and her career, and suddenly she was without the guy that did all that stuff for her, and she had to do it herself. So I wanted her to be overwhelmed by the sheer numbers of, you know, of then having to take everyone on and all their problems.
Yeah.
But I didn't want the read to get too messy, you know. That I guess was a bit of a challenge for me.
Right.
But other than that, just always writing a book is a challenge, you know, just the discipline of keeping on going, you know.
How long did this book take you to write from start to submission?
Start to finish, it probably took about a year.
Okay.
I have rules about writing. I've got very firm rules. If I'm writing a novel, I have to write 3 good pages a day. And if I'm writing a screenplay, I have to write five good pages a day. And it doesn't really matter when my day begins or ends. It doesn't begin or end until I've done that work that I promised I'll do, kind of thing.
Yeah. Sorry, Mark, I'm just having a question come through from one of our members. They said they'd love to, Diana, they'd love to know how you see the difference with writing a book to a screenplay, and would like to give her thanks for My Mother Frank, one of her favorite Aussie movies, and in particular, as her mother had Alzheimer's, and wants to ask how the casting came about Mary. Oh, many thanks. Okay. So there's a few questions here. So maybe you can start, yes, about what the biggest difference for you is between writing a book and a screenplay, and then we can get to the other.
Well, the big difference for me is a book you kind of do by yourself. When you're writing a movie and making a movie, there are so many creative voices involved. There's the director, and even if you are the director, there's also the producer, there are marketing executives, there are studio executives. Everybody's got their 2 cents worth to put in. When you're working in Australia, you're working also with Screen Australia, so you're getting all of their people giving you notes as well. So you've got like millions and millions of notes, and you need to take all that on board. But the kind of creative energy that takes to take all that in and put it into the screenplay is immense. And sometimes you're left holding on to this quivering thread of an idea that you had, wondering why on earth you'd begun in the first place, because you've got so many voices kind of at you about it.
Yeah.
Whereas writing a novel, and really the reason I started writing novels was it's just me. I mean, sure, I have an editor later down the track, but it's a much simpler, it's a much clearer creative process. It's just me and a typewriter or a keyboard, you know, going. Yeah. So that for me is the big difference between the two. Both of them, I think, I write visually and I think visually. So both with a novel and a screenplay, they're both for me kind of, I'm trying to paint pictures for you as readers and viewers. So that's kind of similar. But the big difference is sort of how I feel about it for me. Yeah.
Amazing any movies get made when there's that many people giving input. You know, it can get tricky for sure. And we can talk a little bit, we'll go back to the book in a second, but if you want to just maybe
yes, the other question. Sorry,
mention how the casting came about for My Mother Frank.
It's loosely based on my mother, who went to university with me. My Mother Frank is a story of, it's like 2 coming of age stories. It's a boy beginning at university, discovering that his mother has enrolled in the same university, and it's about their relationship. And it's her coming of age just at a time when she learns that she's got Alzheimer's disease. So she is finally free and decides to use her mind, and then it's sort of being taken away from her. So it's about all those things. I wanted an Irish actress because my mother was, you know, it was pretty simple, really. My mother was Irish. So I went to the UK and met a whole lot of people, and Sinead Cusack, who played Frank, was sort of one of those people, and she just seemed to be perfect for it. And so we cast Sinead. So that's how that happened. And then we got Sam Neill on board, and that was fantastic. So Sam plays her professor, and Rose Byrne came on board, a very young Rose Byrne. She was 19 or something then, and young Matt Newton. So, you know, that was sort of the core team that happened there. But it began with Sinead Cusack, who played Frank.
That's awesome. What a talented group that you had there. It's amazing. Very good ensemble. Yeah. Just going back to things I need you to know, it really explores, you know, themes of transformation and connection and things like that. Is there anything that you hope will resonate with readers or that they'll take away after finishing the book?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, be careful of strange men is one of them. But I think the thing that I would really like people to take away is that love story between Bertie and Ned. And the thing that sometimes what's right under our very nose and we take for granted is actually quite precious and rare. And I think that's the thing that I would like people to kind of carry with them with this book more than anything.
Yeah, no, that's a really powerful message. And you're right, often it's hard for us to appreciate what we have until we lose it. So
yeah,
a great message to kind of take stock of what's around us and try and be grateful for that.
yeah.
Was there a favorite scene like that you wrote? Anything that you enjoyed writing the most?
Look, the thing that I enjoyed writing the most was about that terrible mother, Dawn.
That was amazing.
She was so deliciously fun.
It was.
You know, I had no one in particular in mind, but she's sort of an amalgam of, you know, wicked narcissistic mothers kind of thing. I have a few friends with narcissistic, you know, really have difficult relationships with their mothers, and they're quite narcissistic. And so, you know, when they would tell me those stories, I would prick up my ears and listen and take notes, kind of thing, mental notes. And so that's where Dawn came. So I guess the person you know, the part that I liked most was sort of describing Dawn and how she came to be famous and how she decided to marry Des and to set her up like that as this sort of kind of wicked kind of character but fun as well.
I loved reading about her. I think it was lighthearted, but fun and funny. And yeah, I had such a strong image of her in my head. You nailed that.
Great.
Yeah.
Did you physically picture anybody as a matter of interest?
Do you know, this is probably way off, but I was thinking like Baz Luhrmann's Strictly Ballroom a little bit. Like I know she was classy and elegant, but I kept having images of that kind of like with the too much makeup, or I don't know, but yeah.
I like that. Yeah, that's great. I'm always fascinated to hear how people see it, what people have in their head. You know,
I think it could have been her personality that was taking me to that character, like that. And any sort of characters or scenes that you sort of started writing and then surprised you as they developed? Or did you?
And it was the most uncomfortable scene to write was that very end stuff when Marcello turns violent.
Yeah.
And I had decided not to describe much of that, but found myself going through every moment in great detail. And I wasn't sure about doing that, but I felt like after the big, long journey we'd been on, I kind of needed to pay that off authentically. And the only way to do that was to put the reader in the room with Bertie and Marcello and put everyone through that. But I found that very uncomfortable to write. And because I was so fond of Bertie at that point, you know, I mean, she's a very difficult, complicated person and quite unlikable, you know, at various points. But I, as I wrote her, I became more and more fond of her. And yeah, so I found that very difficult, that last bit of the book.
Yeah. No, and you're right, Birdie definitely redeemed herself throughout the novel. Yeah. So it was awesome. And the book is set in Australia, but obviously people are reading this all around the world. How did you pick the setting? Because you spend your time in Spain and Australia. What made you?
Well, yeah, I don't know. I've spent about a year all up living in Melbourne, and I'm very fond of it. So I thought I'd just start it there. I know it well. I've been there. I lived there to edit 2 films, and so I was down there for 6 months on 2 separate occasions. So I wrote about where I was living, and I mean, I like to write about, if you can describe things well by knowing exactly, by remembering it in your mind's eye. So a lot of that was sort of what I was doing with Melbourne, and the same with Sydney. I actually, the house that they moved into in Sydney was the home of a childhood friend. So I was able to walk up and down those stairs and down the hallways and open windows and doors and stand and look at it in my mind. And so that's, I guess, why I chose those two locations. They were very vivid for me. There wasn't really any kind of strong metaphoric reason why it was Sydney and Melbourne. It's just, I knew them. So that's sort of what I wrote about, really.
Yeah, awesome. And I loved the title. I thought it was quite clever. And whoever's read the book would, I think, agree. But how did you come up with that title? Did you come up with it, or did somebody suggest?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
It just arrived. It was really interesting. As I said, I'd been thinking about those 2 separate ideas, and like one morning, the whole book went, like it was one of those things where I'm very rarely visited with, brain waves. I normally have to just plot. I'm a real plotter, but that title arrived and how to do it arrived. So I bashed out about 10 pages of plot in one morning and just sent that off to my agent and said, what do you think of that? And she was like, yeah, it's pretty good, so go from there. So that's how that happened, really. It just things I need you to know. And then it just seemed like a perfect title. So I stuck with it. Yeah.
Amazing. And so you sent that off to your agent. Who's the first person that you would send something to for feedback? Is it your agent or editor or your partner?
Yeah, I have sort of like a group of friends who are readers, including my wife, people who are authors themselves, Catherine Hayman and Suzanne Leal, who are both authors. Menno Mayas, that I wrote the screenplay for Contact with. He wrote all of the early Spielberg films. And so they're people who I know will have useful comments, but also be kind.
They know what it's like to be in.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They're fellow warriors. So yeah. So I've sent it to those people first and get feedback from them. Also, Joanna Weinberg, that I wrote Goddess with, is another reader. So I have my readers kind of thing, and sent that out. Then I get their feedback and I dive back in. It's a while before it actually gets to the publisher. I save my, I tend to say to my agent, oh, I'm thinking of doing this, but I really kind of keep my powder dry with that, because you only ever get one good read out of anybody, really. You can keep on saying, oh, I've changed it. Oh, I've changed it. Oh, I've changed it. But really, it's that very first time. It's so powerful.
Yeah, that impression. Yeah.
So for my editor and my agent and my publisher, I save it till I'm like, yes, no, I think I'm really ready to show you this. Yeah.
That's great. And just speaking of your writing process, I know you said you've got some rules. Do you have a sort of like a schedule or any rituals that help you stay productive and focused? Do you ever have writer's block? Sometimes you said you plot. Yeah.
I have, I'll introduce you to my friend who's just behind me. So
Is it a puppet?
yes, well, it's sort of a little frog. He's my genius. So when I was, my mother-in-law bought him in New York, actually. We were talking
Oh, okay. Yes.
about earlier about New York.
Yeah.
She bought him in New York. He's a little handmade puppet. I'm just going to put you down there.
Amazing.
Be
Yeah.
good. When I was writing my book on Rome, on The Lover's Guide to Rome, I learned that the ancients never apportioned genius to the self. It wasn't until the Renaissance that the idea of people being geniuses occurred. Before that, geniuses lived in the walls or the floor around you, and genius visited you.
Okay.
And one of the big hurdles that I've always had writing anything is this feeling, this obligation to be, is it good enough? Is it brilliant? Is it, have I made it special enough kind of thing? And sometimes that kind of self-talk can just stop you in your tracks, you know, and you slow down. So when I hit upon this notion of genius being outside you not being a genius or having to be a genius, it being in other things, I decided to make him my genius.
Yeah.
And so my process is I show up and do the work. And if he shows up and is brilliant, then that's not my fault, or, you know, like I'm doing my best.
Yes.
It's his job. So that's kind of how I work. And I'm not like psychopathically attached to him, you know, like if I lost him, if he lost me, I would just find it, you know, like find something else.
Another puppet. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But as an idea, it's how I work. Yeah.
That's a great way to actually alleviate some of that pressure, like psychologically, on you. Yeah. Does he have a name before we move on to the next question?
No.
No.
No, he's just
genius.
Unnamed. Just genius. Yeah. Yeah.
And what was the transition like from sort of film to writing books? I know you've sort of spoken about the difference, but for the writing process, was that a natural sort of progression, or was there a lot of learning for you, or it's just kind of been like a seamless transition?
It wasn't that difficult for me because I'd done so much screenwriting. And in fact, it was a liberation, because one thing you can do with a novel that you can't do with as a screenplay is you can wander down little dead ends and laneways and alleyways and just write about that for a bit and then come back and continue on with the main plot. And you can't do that with a screenplay. A screenplay has to drive relentlessly forward. You know, you can't have strange little picadillos here and there. So in fact, I was able to, you know, indulge myself, I suppose, as a writer more. I found it very surprisingly liberating. I mean, I think the reason that I hadn't written a novel, I didn't really write a novel until my late 30s, maybe late 40s, maybe even early 50s. I kept thinking, imagine writing a novel and then nobody wanting to publish it, nobody wanting to read it, and you've done all this work. I just, that was another thing that stopped me in my tracks. And eventually I was just like, I'm just going to do this. And if no one reads it, no one, you know, then I'll be sad about that. But, you know, I've got to give it a go. Yeah.
Nothing ventured, nothing gained. But I'm certainly glad that you did, because I loved the book, as I mentioned. Got another question from a member to ask, if you set the book in Spain, would the story be different? And that's the first question, and maybe we'll let you answer that, and then there's another question from them.
Yeah, okay. That's a great question. I think the fundamentals of the story would be the same, but the particulars would be so different, because Spain is such a completely different society. The way it operates here, it's much more family oriented. It's much less, you know, in Spain, you still see families all dressed the same. You know, the kids are all dressed in exactly the same outfit kind of thing. And it's not just sort of Sunday church stuff. It's just out kind of thing. It's so interesting. I think the effects of Franco and being in a dictatorship for as long as they have, and even though they've caught up with the modern world in many ways, there are also these very traditional ways that the Spanish kind of operate. And so I think probably just there would be details about the novel that would touch on that sort of, have a different flavor from that point of view. But fundamentally, I guess it would be
Similar.
pretty much the same kind of
Right.
thing. Yeah.
And the other question is, would you like to write for different genres? I'm not sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, yes, I guess this is what I would call this a domestic thriller. And I have enjoyed that. And I would say my previous books are kind of like The Full Ridiculous is very different. It's more personal kind of book. Than The Lover's Guide to Rome is more rom-com-ish. So I would say that I have, in fact, worked through different genres. But I am particularly fond of this of the domestic thriller genre. I think it's an interesting one, because it's sort of people we know. It's people, like people we know intimately, having things happen. I think that's very attractive. Yeah.
And also quite enthralling to read. I loved that element, like the thriller element throughout the book. It was just, captivating. And so I think we've already spoken about, being behind the camera and then at the writer's desk. Is there one that you prefer, or is it hard to pick a favorite?
It's hard to pick a favorite. Like if of the things that I do, I suppose the thing that I love the most is directing. That is so much fun when you're on a set, and you've just got to. It is one of those things where you are absolutely being bombarded by a million people asking you, where to put the camera, what to do, where the lights should go, is that bed the right color, all of those sorts of things are happening around you all the time. It's so absorbing. It's just amazing. It's the thing that very attracted me into this life in the first place. I actually started off studying architecture at Sydney Uni, and I did a couple of years of architecture, and somebody from the Sydney Uni Filmmakers Society asked me to design a set for them. And it was a very fundamental set. It was like two flats and, two walls and a bed, a little bedroom. But I remember the moment of walking onto that set, and there was a camera and a guy standing there and actors and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, oh, hello. This is what I wanted. This is what I would like to try and do. And it seemed impossible to me at that time that I could,
from architecture
a mad sort of fantasy. And also, who gets to do this sort of thing. But the thing that the person that I was watching all the time was the director, thinking, wow, you're just, going like you are the puppeteer. And there's something very thrilling and completely absorbing about that. You sort of feel like a bit like a ninja, you're just chung, 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 just dealing with stuff. Yeah. It's very meditative. You're very in the present. You're actually not doing a lot of thinking. No. You're just there.
Yes. Switched
moving
on.
Forward.
Yes.
Switched on. Yeah. I imagine it's like performing. Yeah. Imagine it's like singing or that sort of stuff. Yeah.
I have to ask, did you finish your architecture degree, or did you?
No.
No, you stopped.
Yeah. And then I went and did a communications degree. I actually went out to Macquarie. Yeah. And I had a sense that I wanted to do sort of storytelling type things. So I did a literature and communications degree. I really wanted to study storytelling. That was because I then joined Sydney University Filmmakers and started making films. And I felt like I don't need to go to film school because I'm already in this process of making films, but I do need to learn how to construct stories and tell stories well. That seemed to me to be the base thing that I needed to do. Yeah.
I love that you weren't afraid to transition, because I think it can be scary and overwhelming, and you've got your set career path and then you're like, whoa, something completely different. And so how did you go? So you studied that, and then how did you end up working? So you were doing some stuff for the Sydney University film.
Yeah. And then I was making little films at Macquarie Uni, and then I graduated, and I waited for the world to come and, Mark, you're brilliant. Come and work with us. And guess what happened? nothing.
Uh,
And so fortunately, while I was at uni, I had a lawn mowing and gardening business. So I was able to continue as a graduate
yeah.
mowing lawns and gardening. Meanwhile, writing to like every production company in Australia, in every capital city, just saying, you know, I'll work for nothing if you just give me a chance, blah, blah, blah. And after a year, I got a job driving the portable toilet for Grundy's, for I think it was a show
I
called
remember
Matlock.
Greenpeace. Yeah.
It was a police drama.
Yeah.
And as my sister very kindly pointed out to me at the time, I was literally starting at the bottom. But I drove the portable toilet round for 6 weeks and then, you know, got another little job. And it was very on and off, but started then working in films and working as an assistant director and worked my way up, all the while also making little films the whole time. One of those little films got the attention of George Miller, who is the, you know, the Kennedy Miller guy, who was the Mad Max and Babe and all that sort of stuff. And he offered me a job there. And so I was very lucky to get swept into the Kennedy Miller world and started making films there.
It's very inspirational that, you know, from such a humble beginning with, you know, driving the Portaloos to where you've achieved. Yeah, it's very inspirational. So we've got lots of questions tonight. So it's hi, I'm noticing the books behind Mark and curious to ask who you like to read. So for relaxing or for inspiration.
Oh, okay, great question. Look, I have incredibly Catholic tastes. I have to say, my favorite book is the you know, the last book that I've just read. I'm actually just reading Catherine Hayman's book, The Apprentice, not The Apprentice, The Accomplice, sorry, which is the story of a shipwreck off the West Australian coast, which is absolutely fascinating. But you know, I don't mine into a particular genre. I guess I just you know, I read. Somebody will say to me, "Oh, you got to read this," and I will read it, kind of thing. So that's what I'm going. I'm very excited. It's my birthday tomorrow, and I'm getting a Kindle for my birthday.
Oh, you
and
haven't
I'm
had
really,
one yet? Yeah.
No, I'm really pleased about it because I prefer reading books, but here in Spain, it's quite difficult, of course, to get editions of English books. So often there are, you know, somebody will say, "Oh, you've got to read that," and it's really hard to get, or it's, you know, 6 weeks away or something.
Right.
I mean, and you can do it through Amazon, but you pay much more. So I'm quite looking forward to being able to just download things on Kindle and read them there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I usually read on Kindle now, just
Do you? Yeah.
but yeah, getting happy birthday from people and
Oh, thank you.
So Mark, I know you are also, can we just speak really quickly, because I know we've kept you for half an hour already, but about your painting. So not only do you write and direct, but you are also an artist.
Yeah,
Did you get into that creative field? Was that inspired from your Sydney uni days when you were making sets in your architecture, or
I painted a lot when I was at school. Not that anybody at school was particularly interested in my painting, but I did. And then doing architecture, in fact, I would nick off to the tin sheds at Sydney Uni and spend most of my time painting. I didn't do a lot of architecturing. I did a lot of painting. And then kind of as I got absorbed into sort of making films, that part of me was kind of satisfied in a sense in other ways by that. So I tended to paint less, but whenever I had holidays or whatever, I would continue painting. As a teenager, I had a racket going with my mum where she would go to various like luncheons or whatever and come back and say, "Oh, my friend Marcia has, you know, just put purple curtains in her living room. And, you know, if you were to do a tree with purple bark, I think we might be able to sell it to Marcia." So I'd paint up a tree with purple bark and sell it to Marcia. And so, you know, actually I did quite well at this terrible commercial kind of, you know, completely non-rarefied approach to banging out paintings. But during COVID, we came here to Spain for various reasons. And I found myself very inspired by Spanish painters, by mid-century Spanish painters. But I also, as you said in the intro, all of my work involves, my films and my books involve characters or people who are some way fractured or broken. But when they come together, they transcend their brokenness, and they can achieve things beyond the things that they could achieve if they were individuals. And when I arrived here, it struck me that there's a visual way of doing that too. So I work in tiles of color, very bright tiles of color that look simply like broken tiles. But then when you put them together, an image emerges. So the thing that appealed to me about that is I'm still working with the central idea of my work, but I'm turning it back into painting.
Yeah,
so that's what I kind of do with the work. Very hard to just, there's an Instagram page, ML Art. And you can probably see the work if you want to look at it and make more sense of it there. But the thing that surprised me nicely was it got picked up by a gallery. So I've had a solo show at the end of last year, and then I had another show a couple of months ago with another artist, and I'm doing another show somewhere else in Spain this time next year that I've got to sort of get painting for. So that it has been lovely to actually, because I thought, you know, I'll just do some nice paintings for me. Yeah, but it's actually, but yeah, it picked up a momentum, which is a nice surprise.
Congratulations, because it's, I know it's very hard in the art world and very competitive and hard to be noticed. So well done.
Yeah, thank you.
Amazing. Did anybody else have a question for Mark that they would like to ask? And I'll just see if anybody has a question. And while we're waiting, I'll just ask you one or two more questions. I wanted to know, so when you're not writing or directing or painting, is there any other kind of hobby or activity that you like to do?
The thing that I miss about being in Spain, because we're living in Valencia on the Mediterranean, there's not much surf here. And in Sydney, I surfed every morning. I would drive down to Manly and have a surf. And I really, that was my hobby. That was my meditation. It was the thing that would clear my head. And then we moved to Manly. We bought a flat in Manly. We sold our family home and bought a flat there. And then I found that I got really stupidly picky about the waves. I would come out every morning and go, no, that's not good enough. I'll come back later. And I found myself surfing less when I lived on the beach than I did when I lived 20 kilometers from the beach and had to drive every morning.
Taking things for granted, when you're at your doorstep.
And I really miss that here. I really miss having a surf here. But you know, the beach is my hobby. I guess I walk and do all that, and reading.
Yeah, nice. And you do come to, you still visit Australia frequently?
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, frequent. Well, I'm there, you know, like once a year I come. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And I'd love to know what you're working on next. Is it a book? I know you've got your art and you're busy with that, but any books or any screenplays or anything, any directing happening?
Yes, I've got another film coming up that we're casting at the moment. I'd love to tell you more about that, but I can't, you know, like I'm not supposed to talk about it. But hopefully that will happen next year. You know, you never know with films. I mean, I never believe that a film is going to happen until I'm literally standing on the set going, hello, everybody, and, you know, let's shoot this shot. Then I believe it'll happen. Up until that moment, it can fall apart, and it can even fall apart then. You know, that hasn't fortunately ever happened to me. But, you know, so many projects, you get so close. And so, but hopefully next year there'll be that. And then I've sort of got another book brewing as well. Yeah. So I'm just seeing what happens with that. Yeah.
Awesome. Oh, we'll definitely be staying tuned for that.
Thank you.
Oh, somebody's just asked what's your next project, and somebody's asked if you have any ideas in the pipeline for a next novel. So yes.
Yes, and yes.
We were all very eager to to see the next novel, I think. Look, Mark, I just wanted to say thank you so much, A, for such an awesome book, and then B, for sharing all your insights and your experiences with us so openly today. It's been such a pleasure talking about things I need you to know and everything else that you're up to, and learning about your journey and your beginnings. And as I said, I really hope that we see another book from you in the near future. And thank you everybody for tuning in. And where should we follow you to stay up to date with what's next? Do you have
okay. Yeah, I've got a Facebook page, which is Mark Lamprell, writer, director, novelist, or screenwriter, director, novelist. Or it's I've got personal one, which is no point because I don't put much on there, but there's
Yep.
a professional page that is, yeah.
I'll find it and
the
I'll share
place
it
to
with our
go there.
members.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well,
Okay.
thank you so
Great.
much, Mark. Enjoy that Spanish sunshine and
Thank you. I will. Yeah. And well, the sunshine's coming to Australia, so you know.
it is.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Take
Okay.
care, and we'll see you
Thank
soon.
you, everybody. Thanks for having me.
Thanks,
Really
Mark.
enjoyed it. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.